Our last chapter is on ecology, and as we've had for every other chapter, here are the learning objectives, and we will march through these, and that'll take us to the end. So, in order to talk about ecology, we should define a few things. For example, what is ecology? What is an ecosystem? And what do we mean when we say biodiversity? So, ecology, many people, when they think of ecology, they think it means recycling and pollution. But if we look at the journals that publish scientific research on ecology, what do we find? Let's take a look. So, here are just some of the ecology journals, scientific journals from the library, and we can see what are they talking about? Let's see. Land use history and seed dispersal drive divergent plant community assembly patterns in urban vacant lots, compensatory dynamics, maintain bird phylogenetic diversity, and good grief, what are they talking about? Fungal ecology, this is one of my favorites because I am a mycologist. Community analysis of Persian oak fungal microbiome under dust storm conditions. Morphological and functional changes in mycelium and mycorrhizas of tuber borchii due to heat stress. Oh my goodness, what's happening? And this is the journal Ecology from the Ecological Society of America. Biotic resistance shapes the influence of propagule pressure on invasion success in bacterial communities. Good lord, what are we even talking about? Basic and applied ecology, okay? Basic. No detrimental effects of delayed mowing or uncut grass refuges on plant and bryophyte community structure and phytomass production in low intensity hay meadows. So far, I've seen nothing to do with ecology, with recycling or pollution, ecological response to habitat fragmentation, role of sexual selection in local adaptation and speciation, at the African Journal of Ecology. Modeling catch per unit effort of the Black Volta near the Bui Dam in Ghana. Partial bivoltanism and emergence patterns in North African endemic damselfly, Calopteryx exule, conservation implications. Okay, so what do all of these things have in common other than being very, very um, complex and difficult for the lay people to understand? What they're all talking about in all these articles is abundance and distribution of different organisms. So, ecology is the scientific study of abundance and distribution. It's also the study of the interactions between organisms and their environment. In other words, in this greatly diverse world in which we live, why is it that we find some organisms only in some places and in certain numbers? And how do they continue to survive and reproduce? How do they maintain their biological fitness? So, for example, why is it that you can walk out your door just about anywhere in the southeast and you don't have to go too far to find a mosquito? Whereas if you go to northern Canada, you're probably not going to find any mosquitoes. Or if you're out in the middle of the open ocean, you're not going to find any mosquitoes. Or pick any other species you want, and it exists only within a fairly narrow range of conditions uh, overall on the Earth. There's no one species that you're going to find everywhere in all places at all times. And ecology kind of asks the question, why is that the case? What does it take for an organism to be able to survive and reproduce in a certain habitat? And why is it important? Well, it's especially important in terms of species that are invasive. If you've lived in the southeast for any significant portion of your life, you've probably seen kudzu and know what a terrible weed it is. And we say that it's invasive because it can actually go into, it can actually um, impact our human activities. So this nice piece of land here would require a lot of effort to remove that kudzu and actually use it for some other purpose other than just being a kudzu farm. Kudzu was actually brought to the southeast intentionally to try and stabilize hillsides to try and prevent erosion, and it just kind of took off and went crazy. Which, if they'd done their ecological homework, that might not have happened. So that's kind of a case of biodiversity gone awry in one direction. But then ecologists are also interested in uh, dispersal and abundance in the other direction. So bald eagles and tigers, our university's representative animals, are both threatened species. The bald eagle was formerly listed on the endangered species list, meaning that it was in danger of going extinct. Their numbers were declining greatly, and ecologists were able to determine the causes of the bald eagle decline and able to come up with an actionable plan to bring back the bald eagle. And the bald eagle is actually a success story as far as the Endangered Species Act is concerned, because it has actually been bald eagles have been delisted. They've been removed from the endangered species list because they have grown to such abundance that they're not as much of a concern anymore. Tigers, on the other hand, are not native to this area, fortunately for us, because they are very dangerous animals. But they are found throughout Eastern Asia, and there are a number of subspecies there that have actually gone extinct within human history. The Javan tiger and the Bali tiger have both gone extinct in those parts of Indonesia, and many other tigers are endangered. They're critically endangered. Their numbers are dwindling for a number of reasons: habitat loss, poaching, things of that sort. So we need to try and figure out ways to be able to increase the numbers of tigers, their abundance, and their distribution, where you can find them. And so, again, that's something that wildlife ecologists are acutely interested in. So, an ecosystem is all of the organisms within a given area and the non-living factors with which they interact. So we go out into Tuskegee National Forest, which is nearby, and we find that there are trees living there: pine trees, hardwood trees, different species of trees, different species of grasses and forbs or leafy plants. Um, and an array of different animals that live out there: deer, squirrels, raccoons, possums, things of that sort, all the way down to the bacteria and the fungi and the insects, everything that lives within a certain area, and those non-living factors, things like bodies of water, soil conditions, things like that, contribute to the functioning of an ecosystem. So biodiversity, I've already mentioned it sort of in passing, but biodiversity, it means the variety of living things. So it can be genetic diversity. That's an issue with some of these tigers, is that as their numbers dwindle, they're losing a lot of their genetic diversity. And if they aren't genetically diverse enough, if there isn't enough heritable variation in those populations, it can make the recovery of those species all the more difficult. But species diversity, ecosystem diversity, all of the life that occurs at these different levels can be measured um, and assessed to try to determine how much biodiversity there is on Earth. So at present, one of the best estimates I've heard for the number of species of all living things on Earth is somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 million different species. But numbers range from as little as around 8 million to up to 90 million. And that's including a lot of things that scientists have yet to discover. That's not including all of the undescribed species, the ones that we have not actually explored just yet. Okay, so our second learning objective asks the question, what are the three parts of the biosphere? So what is the biosphere in the first place? The biosphere is where all of the living organisms, all of the biodiversity on Earth lives. And you might say to yourself, well, isn't it everywhere? And yes and no. I mean, it's everywhere we look for it, but we can't go too high up into the atmosphere without losing the support of our living planet. And we can't go too far under the oceans or into the soil and continue to find living organisms. The Earth's core, as far as we know it, is a dead place. Life cannot survive there. Life can't survive out in space. So where do we find life? We find it from the bottoms of the oceans into the soil and into the atmosphere. So the biosphere is composed of three non-living components that support the life that lives within the biosphere. So the atmosphere is where all of the gases that provide for the life of the planet, things like the oxygen that we breathe, and nitrogen and other atmospheric gases. Water is found within the hydrosphere. That includes ocean water, lake water, ice caps, clouds, moisture in the air, so the humidity. That's all part of the hydrosphere. And then the lithosphere is the sphere of the earth and rocks. So the part of soil that is not living. There are a lot of living things that live in the soil, especially microbial life, bacteria, fungi, things like that. But the lithosphere is the mineral component of soil and giant rocks and land masses. Okay, so one of the things that has important ties to abundance and distribution, why do we find things where we do, is the climate. So we hear a lot about climate. So I think it's about time we had a definition of what climate is. So climate is the patterns of weather that may prevail over a certain landmass over a longer time frame than just the day-to-day, the week-to-week. So over years or centuries. So our climate is driven largely by the activity of our sun, the star at the middle of our solar system, which provides us with almost all of the energy that life on Earth needs, but it also drives the weather patterns that we observe. Now, we also know that there are processes that are on the Earth's surface that function to drive climate as well. And one thing that you've probably heard of is the composition of gases in our atmosphere are having an effect on our global climate. And this is something that we've seen through the ancient past. We've seen changes in the Earth's atmosphere having an effect on climate. But also things like the flow of ocean currents determines when there'll be warm weather, when there'll be cool weather. And throughout the temperate regions above the tropical, to the north and the south of the tropical regions, we have seasonality. Within the tropics, the weather stays fairly consistent throughout the entire year, which is what defines the tropics. But in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, we have 4 distinct seasons. Winter, summer, spring, and fall, not in that order, of course. But the seasons in the southern hemisphere are the reverse of what we have here in the northern hemisphere. I'll explain why that is in a minute. So when it's summer here, as it is as I'm recording this, It is actually winter in the southern hemisphere. So in places like South Africa and Australia, they are experiencing their winter.